So it's 5 o'clock. Why don't we pull up by the fireside, stroke the cat, settle in, and I can give everybody an update. And again, maybe a few people will join as well. So I wear two hats, but for this presentation, I'm going to wear my open source hat. So I'm the product manager for BigBlueButton. I'm the one that's been managing all the releases since the beginning of the project. And what I'm going to do is give you just an overview of the project, some statistics, where we're at with it, some of the recent events, the work that's going on with what we call BigBlueButton 0.90. What we're running right here is 0.81, which was our 11th release. So what we're working on right now is our 12th release. We do about one major release a year. In the early days, it revved a bit more quickly, but over the last 2 years, it's been about one major release a year. And I'll tell you I'll share with you sort of the design and the thinking behind that. And I'll talk about these two guys right here, the HTML5 client and the mobile client, and then feedback and questions. So you can ask me questions throughout. So the mission for our project is we believe every student with a web browser should have access to a high quality online learning experience. And we intend to make that possible with BigBlueButton. My personal vision is someday I'll be backpacking through Africa. I'll come across a village and I'll be chatting with one of the leaders, and they'll talk about the school and the software that they use to teach their students remotely and allow their students to attend remote classes, and it's going to be BigBlueButton. And that's my vision is I'll have that experience someday. So BigBlueButton would not exist without some very determined committers who have been working on the project for many years. Richard Alam is the chief architect of BigBlueButton. He is the originator of the product, and he originated it. He went to Carleton University, which is based in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. And I met him there almost 7 years ago, and we together started working on the project. And it's now, with the help of others, this is where it's at. Felipe Sagagno is in Brazil and works on a project called MConf, which is actually a fork of BigBlueButton. There's a university down there that put a lot of effort and money into helping us build out BigBlueButton so it could replace their existing commercial system. And this is where the open source model shines. A lot of the work they did went back into the project. Myself, I'm a developer on BigBlueButton, and I'm the product manager. I am the one who has to make the decisions about what goes in the product, the QA of the product, and to be honest, more often than I say no than I say yes. We're really key on just making sure the product is high quality. Thiago Jacobs works with the Red 5 project, which is core component of our project. Chad Pilkey works at Seneca College. Seneca College has the Center for Development of Open Source Technologies, and they have, I think, 4 students this summer, or maybe it's 5, working on BigBlueButton. Again, another example of how the open source business model works. And Guga Salazar has been working on BigBlueButton for over 2 years on the record and play back infrastructure and other parts. So I always say if anyone's interested to become a committer, we have an FAQ how to do it. It's not a small piece of software. I shall skip ahead. Let's see, where are the slides? Oh, I have a slide deck of all the pieces of it's in the software. We'll get to it in a moment. So in terms of priorities, this is what I sort of hold as the priorities in this order for end users. Stability first, because if it's not stable, nothing else matters. Usability, can't use it, nothing else matters. Then it's features, then it's security. And for the administrators, developers out there, extensibility through the API and scalability. But this is what we work on the most. These two guys right here. The use cases for BigBlueButton are sort of the 3 core, the one-to-one small group, which is like virtual office hours, student retention, online tutoring, coaching, small group collaboration, which is really what we're doing here. You know, there's a group of people coming together, we're sharing their webcams, anybody can talk if they want, or one-to-many. And if you read through our documentation, we have this number of 25 users or less. It's completely arbitrary. We probably will increase it because a lot of times BigBlueButton can be used for sessions where a single session has a lot more than 25. But the reason we put some number out there is that in the absence of a number, people will just think it'll do everything. We do not recommend using BigBlueButton for 100 people or 150 or 200. If you're going to do a training session for 200 people, you're going to use a streaming architecture where one person talks and one person shares their webcam and everyone else gets a stream. In BigBlueButton, we created an architecture where you could have 25 people all together, everybody talking, most of them sharing webcams. Someone did send me a screenshot of 25 webcams. That's quite a lot. Most of it's 9 or 10. So we built a highly collaborative architecture, not just a simple streaming architecture. In many ways, I like to think we solved the harder problem. And there's a lot more use cases for, the total number of instances of these use cases is a lot larger than, say, the number of instances where you have 200 or more students. So this is what we focus on. You've seen BigBlueButton, because of course you've been using it at the iMoot, but we do the core desktop sharing, audio, chat, video, and slides. And there's a few more components we're adding to this release, or to the next release. A couple screenshots. Here I am doing 4 HD webcams. This is an example. This is the Web Forward program using BigBlueButton at Mozilla. And these are some of the developers just hanging out, working on BigBlueButton, and we use it internally for all of our meetings. So we test it as well. And we know there's a lot of other open source projects use it as well. The Matterhorn project uses it for its developer calls. And of course, iMoot as well. Over the last 2 releases, we put in the record and playback infrastructure so that it actually will record all the activity in a session. We record it using Popcorn. We play it back using Popcorn.js. So this is like GIF images, and these are SVG. This is a video file, which is your desktop sharing, your audio and your video. Chats here, and you have the thumbnails here as well. And this is the sort of slide which talks about just the complexity behind the system. A lot of open source projects kind of architected together. And the 2 ones I always like to give credit to are Red 5, which is the open source implementation of Adobe's Flash Media Server. This is the real-time server that's handling all the packets. So when I draw, or if I zoom in or zoom out, all these messages are going back and forth through Red 5. And there's FreeSwitch, which is an open source soft switch or phone switch. It's handling all the audio. It's what's allowing us to put dial-in numbers so we can pick up the phone. Oh, Krista, we definitely recommend using the built-in recording functionality. We now record everything in BigBlueButton. So you get all the activity. Previously, we used to use Matterhorn for some types of record and playback, but now you can pretty much use BigBlueButton out of the box. But we still have a Matterhorn integration. The Matterhorn project is pretty cool. So in terms of our community, in the beginning there were 3 members in the developer mailing list. Now there are over 1,600. It usually tracks anywhere between maybe 100 to 200 or 300 posts per month. There's a users mailing list, about 800, and the setup mailing list is where people come to ask questions about setting up BigBlueButton on their own systems. Lots of activity. And we recently added a Spanish mailing list as well. We have a Spanish member speaking here, which could help out people who are in Spanish or speaking Spanish as well. And then GitHub as well. Lots of activity on GitHub. I think I actually copied and pasted that on GitHub. Yeah, I have it here. So in terms of our kind of social media, Facebook, I just did this a few minutes ago, so we are at 3,217 likes. And Twitter, the Twitter account has 2,224. And I like to say it's all organic, no special preservatives. We didn't pay anybody to like us or follow us. I think that's a silly way to grow a community. This is only people who have organically come to us and said, yep, we're going to like. And there's the forks on GitHub. We're almost at 2,000 forks. In terms of localization, we use a server, a site called Transifex, where there's about 35 languages that we have localized and the BigBlueButton, and these are the ones that have 100% coverage. So this is a great part of the open source. As we finish up the release, we go to our community. A lot of them contribute to localization, and you can see the menu in the upper right-hand corner, which allows you to choose different languages, and these are all contributed by the community. We do the English one, of course. There are quite a number of integrations with BigBlueButton. Moodle, of which I'm the co-author one, is probably the one closest to our heart. We've been working on it and built it over the last almost 4 years now. It is really important for us that Moodle has a high-quality integration with BigBlueButton that makes it really easy to use it inside the Moodle environment. But I think it's also, I think you would agree, it's also important that as an open source web conferencing system for online learning, that the more projects that use BigBlueButton, the more all of the projects benefit from improvements to BigBlueButton and uses of it and so on. So we do have close integrations with Sakai, WordPress, Canvas, and then there are others which the community has contributed as well. In terms of the Moodle integration, I was very happy to see last year of all the hundreds of plugins available, the BigBlueButton plugin came in at number 13th overall. And again, that's all organic. Krista, for translating BBB, we use a site called Transifex, which we upload our language strings to Transifex, and then other people can come in and create the equivalent in their language. It's actually the third site that we've used. First, we did something with Drupal. I had a co-op student work on it for the whole summer to create a language site. And then we used, I forget the site it was called, but then it went away, and then we moved to Transifex. And Transifex has been good. So with the latest versions of BigBlueButton, you don't have to install, you don't have to download anything anymore. You can pull it out of the plugin database, install it. It comes pre-configured with credentials for using a test install server that Blindside Networks provides. And that test install server is always running. It's available there for anybody to try out. And that way, they get an immediate experience out of BigBlueButton. Yeah. And then in terms of the interface, very simple. You can give it the name. What do you want to see when people for the activity link? The welcome message. Do you want it to open in a new window? Do you want students to wait until a moderator joins? This one's really good because you don't have to create a BigBlueButton activity link for every week. You could just create one called online course, and if you set this that students must wait until a moderator joins, it's like there's a classroom that's always there, but the door is locked. As soon as the moderator goes in, the teacher, the door is open and students will follow in behind them. So if a student tries to go into a session where this is enabled, all they'll see is that their browser will say, the moderator has not yet entered the session, and it will just idle and monitor the session until a moderator enters. At that point, it'll automatically join the users. And you can schedule a session. For simplicity, special events, yes, but for simplicity, I almost recommend don't schedule it, because if you have to remember to change the schedule, something that you might forget, just set up the room, set it that the students must wait till the moderator joins, and you're good. And then there's a record here as well. You can specify whether it's recorded, and you can specify a duration. You wouldn't actually specify 4. That'd be a bit silly. You can leave the durations blank, and which means that the meeting will continue until the last person leaves. And the recording begins when the first person enters up to the last person leaves. But we're adding more capabilities for recording in the release coming up. Yes, the record button. I have a screenshot of it. Once you create a link, an activity link, it'll appear inside a course, and when students or the faculty, or I'll call it a non-student, come in, students get mapped to viewers and non-students get mapped to moderators. Yes. And then when you view the recordings inside of Moodle, you'll see them here, and you'll see the duration, and the teacher has the ability to publish and unpublish a recording or delete it. And we use the Moodle, a lot of stuff we use in Moodle, obviously the plugins in the Moodle database, we use the Moodle issue tracker. And I think our plugin also uses the Moodle language facility as well. A couple screenshots from the other integrations, the WordPress integration, very popular, we're glad to have it. Been very highly rated, 8 reviews so far, 5 out of 5. A couple others, Docebo has an integration, Sakai has an integration, Canvas has an integration, and we recently did the LTI certification, and then we went to IMS and got the certificate. We joined IMS with the BigBlueButton Inc., joined IMS, and then we got certified as well for LTI 1.0. So let me talk about the version that we're working on now. The last release was on November 7th, 2013. So we've been working quite a few months now on the new release. Where we're at, this is the development process we go through. We're still in the development of BigBlueButton 0.90. We will hit beta when we have no major bugs left, all features implemented, all major features implemented. It's been tested, the packaging and the documentation are ready, and we have a build environment. Once we do that, we announce beta, and the reasoning behind that is we want people to have a really good experience when they try it out. It doesn't make any sense for us to say, hey, there's a beta, and people say, well, I just found all these bugs. No, we're going to fix and find all the bugs that we can, and then we go to beta, and hopefully the users find all the, so any bugs they find are going to be more the edge cases. Once we have 0 bugs open, and all the development is finished, we go to release candidate. And for us, a release candidate is we can release this. The last release, we had 2 beta releases and 4 release candidates. And this reflects our desire to make sure that every release in BigBlueButton is more stable and easier to use than the last release. And the last 2 releases have been pretty easy and stable. But we test and we test and we test. My goal as a product manager is that we don't have to go back and fix things. If it takes us 2 extra months to finish up a release, we will work on it for 2 extra months, just so that the brand of BigBlueButton is determined by a promise to provide remote students a high-quality learning experience and the delivery of that promise. And we do want to deliver on the promise. And then we release. So here are the things that we've been working on for the next release. A start-stop button, improved audio settings dialog, polling module, lock settings, support for WebRTC, and the packaging. And the packaging is actually for Ubuntu 14.04. And I'll talk about that in a moment. So I have some screenshots for each. So this is what the start-stop button will look like. There will be a new, for the moderators, there will be a new icon in the toolbar, and it will look like a record button. By default, it will not be on. So if a meeting's set to be recorded, you'll see this, but the recording of what gets, let me back up. We actually record everything in the meeting, but the record button will determine what gets put into the playback. So once the moderator clicks this button, there'll be a confirmation, do you want to start recording the session? And if they say yes, then they see this here. So what happens is, in the recording, because again, we're actually recording the entire session, we put these markers down. So there's a start recording marker and a stop recording marker. Maybe it's the start of class and a break, and then the break is over, the teacher or the instructor says, okay, let's start the recording again, stop it. At the end of it, we have these markers that we'll use to process the recording, and what is visible in the final recording is everything that's between those markers. So the ideal would be is that if the moderator, so there's some responsibility here, with great power comes great responsibility, that if you have a session to be recorded but nobody ever starts recording, nothing will be produced, which I think makes sense. You have the ability to start and stop. Yes, Teresa, the editing, it's a little tricky because there's a lot of events that get generated in BigBlueButton, and we haven't quite figured out how to do it. Probably what we may do is, after this release is done, what we may do is give you an interface for editing and adding start-stop markers after the fact, and then just throw the recording back in for processing again. That's probably going to be the easiest way to do it. Once we get these markers in place through the UI, it's probably not a big stretch for us to create a web interface that you could take a recording and just drop more markers down or move them around. So Christina, right now the design is no. There would be, if you have not recorded the session, or if you have not put down any start-stop markers, the session will not produce any recording. And we're struggling with this a bit. We could do it where, we'll just record every session and it will be like the default behavior. But I've talked to a number of people, and I think other web conferencing systems do something similar, is that they require you to start recording before they'll actually produce a recording. And I'm kind of leaning towards that now because I think a lot of people look for the start recording, stop recording. Well, server space is not one of our worries. It's stability, usability, features. We don't worry about optimizing everything in the nth degree. That's all hidden from the users. I just want to make sure that the behavior is what the users expect, the moderators expect, as much as I can. And I recognize that people have different expectations, so I kind of try to go for the one that most people will expect, but we don't try to implement every expectation, because then the product would just be too complex, which is why we don't have every feature in the whiteboard or all this, everything that every other product has. If we did, we would not have a very good product. So we're also working a lot on the audio. So one of the thoughts is sometimes for some sessions, you may not need to talk. So right now, when you share your webcam, or sorry, when you join the audio bridge, you have to go through a bit of a testing, make sure the microphone's working. So this is kind of what we have right now. We're thinking of having a dialog box come up when you join BigBlueButton, and it's like an audio choice. If you just want to listen to the stream, you can click Listen Only, and it won't ask you to share your webcam or microphone. You'll get no prompt for permissions, and you're just kind of a viewer. This actually gets us a little bit more towards like a webinar type mode for BigBlueButton, where a body of users come in and they're not expected to talk anyway. So this is what we're kind of thinking of. And then, of course, the other choice is you can just pick up the phone. Exactly. So this is a little techie for a moment. The way the audio is working right now is Flash, is what BigBlueButton's written in, is sending the audio stream through UDP, or sorry, actually TCP IP. I can even do this. And it's going to Red 5, and then Red 5 is forwarding onto FreeSwitch. Basically makes a SIP call to FreeSwitch. The browsers, specifically Chrome and Firefox, have now provided really good support for web real-time communication, which is the ability for a browser to make a native connection, usually to another browser, but could also be to a server, for sending audio and video. In an online session, the single most important part of the online session is the audio. So the audio of BigBlueButton is not bad. We've worked on it for many years. But with WebRTC, we can even get better audio because it's UDP, and it's going to be it'll be the browser's infrastructure talking directly to FreeSwitch. It's a shorter path through UDP. And it also, it's encrypted, and it has a very high quality codec called Opus. So what we're thinking of is that the next release will support WebRTC. So it would automatically detect if you're on a Chrome or Firefox and provide support for WebRTC. In terms of the microphone, if you're using Safari or IE, which won't support WebRTC, you're going to use Flash for the audio, which is great. It doesn't matter what browser you use. We'll still bridge you in with audio. Either use WebRTC if you're using Chrome or Firefox, or how we're doing it today. So this is what the audio settings look like today. And this is good. A lot of people just click and they join audio, but the problem is they don't think that it will be, their microphone may or may not be ready. Jeremy, I saw your question. So when do you think it will be released? So we release on quality, not dates. So with my business hat on, I would love to release it soon. But I've done a number of startups, and I've managed quite a few software projects. With my open source hat on, we release when the product is ready. There is no upside for us to release something earlier that has bugs that we know that are there that are still ready to be fixed. So I can't tell you when we release, but I can tell you where we are in our release process. And if I go back to here, we're right here, and we're working hard to finish up the development. And once we get to beta, you can tell that we're getting closer to a release. And then once we get to release candidate, it's getting pretty close. Last release cycle, it took us about 3.5 months to get from the first beta to the final release. And we did that knowing that if we really make it solid, it will make it easier to do the next release. So hopefully, it won't take the same amount of time, but we are prepared to work on it as long as necessary. It's really important for us that customers have a good experience with BigBlueButton in the order of stability, ease of use, and features. Top 3. So the changes that you're going to see when we're using Flash for the audio instead of showing the audio settings dialog box, this is what it will look like. So you'll actually see your the chosen microphone. You'll actually do some adjustments of it, and you'll see the energy as you talk. So with this, we do want to get people into the audio session as quickly as possible, but we also want to make it very visible to them whether they have an active microphone or not. So if you're talking, you should see the energy here. And if you click Join Audio, and we've detected that there's been no energy, we'll actually put up a dialog box that says, your microphone did not show any activity, others probably won't be able to hear you during the session. There's a design that we're working on right now that it's a little bit different, a variation of this where instead of maybe doing this, what we'll do is we'll take you into an echo test room where you'll be in a room by yourself that you can talk and hear your audio come back at you. This will mean it'll go all the way to the server, all the way back. The idea of this is that if you hear yourself faintly, you can go and adjust your microphone, either at the system or come back to here. The whole goal is that to make it easier for users to get into a session with a functioning microphone. Okay, so let's talk about polling. The idea is that there would be, again, for the presenter, in the toolbar, there would be another icon where if you click on it, there'll be some default polls, true, false, maybe yes, no, or ABC, but you'll also be able to create a custom poll as well on the fly. So you'd be able to enter probably just a question, and these are just design mock-ups. These are early, the final UI won't look like this. I think we might actually take out the title, because I think if we just use the question and answer, it's probably going to be enough. The answers on their own are on their own lines, and you can choose whether they're multiple choice or single choice. Once you start the poll, a dialog box will appear showing the question to the users and the available answers, single choice, multiple choice, and then they can submit. The poll, of course, will be anonymous. The presenter will see the results, and when they do stop polling, all the results will be visible. In terms of the record and play back, we're not going to try to insert images of the poll or the results in the presentation. What we're probably going to do for this release is just output the results of the poll to the chat so people can see what the results were. So another capability that we're working on for this release is what we call the lock settings. So there are some times that you want to prevent users from doing certain functionality. And I'll give you the pedagogic use case that I keep thinking about is you have a 2-hour class online, and halfway through the class, you want students to go back to Moodle and do a quiz. And then during that time, you want to prevent them from doing private chat. So you'll have the ability, as any moderator will have the ability to lock out these functionalities from students. And we'll provide APIs so that developers can lock this out by default. So you might have a class of users from your front-end application where you lock the webcam, microphone, public, and private chat. It literally becomes more of a webinar-type mode for them where they're just watching. So this is interesting because we're not adding functionality to BigBlueButton. We're actually just making it possible to restrict functionality. But by doing that, we can cover more use cases, both for how companies or developers would like to use BigBlueButton, but also for online learning. There's a couple features that are more developer. Well, this one's more developer. There's a whole workflow process that goes in behind the scenes when a recording gets processed. So after this session is done, for example, the BigBlueButton server pulls together all the media, the webcams, the audio stream, if I were to share my desktop, plus all the events, the slides, and all the chat events and everything, and it archives them into one folder. And then hands it off to a script, which then processes the recording, which then hands off to another script, which publishes it. And you can put multiple scripts in that workflow, so you can have multiple record and playback formats if you want. So what we're going to do is provide hooks so that developers can drop in files, so that those can drop in scripts, so that after a segment of the workflow is done for recording, a script can do something like, after the recording is published, I could take out the email address, because maybe it was passed into the front end as metadata, and send an email to that person saying the recording is now available. So this is going to allow people to hook in and do more things with the recordings. And we're also going to add to the Get Recordings API call, we're going to add some thumbnail images from the recording. This will allow us in the Moodle get BigBlueButton BN or the recordings BN to actually show thumbnails of the presentation. It makes it more visual, and it makes it easier for students to kind of see which is the recording they're perhaps looking for. Not a big feature, but one that I like it because it has a lot of visual impact. Okay, let me talk about mobile. So these are still designs. What we've been working on is taking the BigBlueButton client, which is ActionScript, and Adobe provides the tools to create an AR application that you can compile to an Android and iOS device. And we've been doing this now for probably about 4 or 5 months. And I have prototypes. I haven't got anything I can show yet, but we have prototypes which allow you to do two-way audio, two-way video, see the presentation, and do two-way chat. So the idea is we're not trying to create a mobile device, a mobile client that will allow you to be presenter. But if we can create a mobile client that allows you to view and participate in a live session, say by two-way chat, at a minimum, then we have covered another set of use cases where you're at a university, students can whip out an iPad, and they can join a live session. There are different limitations on different platforms in terms of what media you can stream and whether you can get access to the webcam and microphone and so on. I'm shooting for a first release which will be more of a viewer client, but nonetheless, the students will be able to view and participate in a live class on iOS and Android. These are some screenshots and some screen designs. The actual prototype looks pretty close to this, and if you turn it, the slide will go sideways. And then this is the UI designs as well. So we're not just taking the BigBlueButton client and running it on a mobile device. For those of you are using the Puffin browser, you can tell the buttons are kind of small. What we're doing is we're taking some of the innards of BigBlueButton, such as what handles the presentation and so on, and putting a complete new UI layer on it that is native, that it's going to be designed for mobile devices. And my goal is to have this out in 2014, by the end of the year. But we will not release it unless it's solid. And this will all be open source, by the way. So we would love to see other companies and other projects build on top of it. Just like there have been a number of companies built on top of BigBlueButton. So lots of good things for this release, but what's still ahead? So there's kind of 3 big ticket items that we hear. Synchronized video playback. What if I could play back a YouTube video? And in BigBlueButton for the presentation, the promise is you never have to ask the students, can you see what I'm pointing at? So if I zoom in and I put the period right above the eye, I don't have to ask, is that what people see? What I see is directly synced up with what you see. So we want to kind of do the same thing with synchronized video playback. If I start and stop, it starts at the same frame and stops at the same frame. There's always challenges with video because where is the video file? Is it on YouTube? Is it some remote server? Do I have to upload it? I have to upload it. Does BigBlueButton have to convert it into another format? Lots of stuff there, but we'll certainly for a future release. And actually, SSL is actually on the roadmap as well. You'll see in a moment. Shared notes and breakout rooms. And these were how come these are done and not done yet? And the other ones are done. It's just basically, do you want to record and play back, or would you like breakout rooms? And a lot of people would say, well, we'd like record and play back. And now what I notice is we start to get some of the core functionality settled down. People are like, well, where are the breakout rooms? Which I take as a very positive thing because it means the other things that we're doing are done well enough that people don't really ask anymore. They just want to get that next feature. In terms of the UI, full screen support. So if you were projecting BigBlueButton on a boardroom screen or in a classroom and there was a remote presenter and you didn't want to see any of the UI, could you just put the presentation into full screen? Just like PowerPoint, and nothing else is visible. And if the presenter switched over to desktop sharing, then the desktop sharing becomes full screen. And the presenter stops desktop sharing, it switches back to the presentation. Little bit of work there, but that's one of the things that we definitely want to do in a future release. Support for right to left languages in the chat. And then whiteboard. Whiteboard's pretty good. Like we've got the core capabilities, but there's more we could do. People ask for the ability to do shared drawing, so multiple people could draw at the same time. This is really a good use case for tutoring, online tutoring. Could the objects be editable? If I drop down some text, can I go back and edit it? Mathematical symbols. People have asked for like a camera icon on the toolbar where if I click it, I get like an image of what my current annotations are, and maybe an easier way to add blank pages. Because you'd probably notice that the whiteboard in BigBlueButton is really just annotations of the current presentation. So if I upload a presentation that has, say, 4 blank slides, I now have a whiteboard with 4 pages in it. Yes. I'm just using a mouse. I should actually use a tablet. I have one at home, but I do it all with mouse. You know, if I try to draw, if I try to, you know, I wouldn't use this if I was writing a lot. But and you can kind of, the whiteboard works because if you want to do something, I'll show you, like, you know, I do this. I mean, if I zoom in and zoom out, it actually looks pretty decent. So if you wanted to do mathematical questions, you could upload a document that has, say, a portrait document. The questions are at the top, and then just the white space below, and then you could do it. And then you could just sort of use the whiteboard. If the whiteboard in BigBlueButton does not have enough fidelity for you, then the easy solution, which I know some people do, is they'll just run the desktop sharing. And if I open up a drawing program like Paint, on a Mac, I'm on a PC, so you can tell. So I could go to my favorite drawing program, and now I could do A, B, and people would see it. You can do the math. So if someone has a favorite program which very fine-grained controls, they could do it, and then when they're done, they can stop the desktop sharing. Yes, very Khan Academy. Another thing for usability, it's one of the things we always want to do, but we just never seem to get to it for release, is like a pre-flight checklist. Check your version of Java, Flash, and bandwidth. There is a Java check, obviously, for desktop sharing. If you watch the videos, you can see when you start desktop sharing, there's a button at the bottom, Test Java. Flash, actually Adobe now recently auto-updates Flash. I think for many people, they're getting a prompt, whereas before you had to remember, you had to be told to update. And of course, with Chrome, it's always up to date. Bandwidth is probably the one that we would love to do some checking before you go in, but it's actually fairly tricky to get an accurate reading of the upload and download speeds. Not impossible, but there's a little bit of trickiness to it. It's not something we've done yet. And we do want to add more security to BigBlueButton. In our FAQ, we say that BigBlueButton is not a secure system. I've watched other open source projects and other systems. If we were to say it's secure, if we were to ever say BigBlueButton was secure, people would just have to find one security hole, and then it would be like, well, that wasn't true. So we're very upfront. The API calls are definitely checksummed. It's not very easy for someone to mock up an API call and say create a meeting. But none of the collaboration in BigBlueButton is meant to be interpreted as anywhere secure. But there are things that we can do in future releases to make BigBlueButton more secure, such as like doing RTMPS, bringing back the content using SSL, and so on. But again, it's always a challenge because you can't solve every problem with a release. So we prioritize the ones that I think are more important for end users. The idea of security, I think, becomes more important to companies that are building on top of BigBlueButton. And as we make BigBlueButton better, more companies want to build on top of it, and they have the option of funding or contributing to the product to make it more secure. My belief is that as BigBlueButton gets better, it's more cost-effective for them to contribute to the project than it is to go get a commercial system. And that's how a lot of development of BigBlueButton is done. So, Christina, if you want to use BigBlueButton if you want to do confidential talks with students where it's not possible for somebody who's determined to tap into the stream, do not use BigBlueButton. There's no security in the collaboration of BigBlueButton. And I know that sounds harsh and cold, but with my product management hat on, I need to be really, really clear. There is no security in the BigBlueButton streams. The only thing we have is that the API calls must be checksummed with a shared secret. And of course, over time, we can make BigBlueButton more secure, but I just want to start clear in that there's no security in it. We try to build a very easy to use stable, and well-integrated system. That was our priorities. Security is obviously something we want to do, but we can't do everything. So the things that I've listed out in the plans for 0.90, I think those are going to be higher value to our community than trying to turn BigBlueButton into a secure collaboration system. If you absolutely need a secure collaboration system, I would suggest going to another product. And then just beware, if another product tells you it's secure, I don't mean Windows is not secure. There's no concept of secure. There's only degrees of security, and it's the world we live in. So for details on our roadmap, the wiki page has sort of a list of what we're planning to do. A lot of the high stuff I covered. And for details on the issues, all the issues that are in BigBlueButton are tracked on the issue tracking list at Google Code as well. And you can see the items that are tagged for BigBlueButton 0.90. And then here is the kind of key points where you can find BigBlueButton.org is the go-to place, our GitHub account, our Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. Someday I'll get the BigBlueButton. I know the person who has it, but I just haven't convinced him to give it to me yet. That's okay. We got BigBlueButton for all the other ones, which I'm very happy about. So at this point, I would love to open up to any other questions or anything that I've talked about that you would like me to go into more detail on, or any feedback.
Thank you, Fred. Look, on behalf of the iMoot organising team, I would, like to thank you for your awesome sponsorship and assistance with the recording of these sessions and providing these rooms. That was a great session. I know that there have been some questions in the forums, so I think you've maybe addressed some of those, but I'll have a wee look and just type some questions in the chat that I've seen elsewhere. But other folks, if you'd like to have the microphone, just unmute yourself and ask your question, or of course use the chat there. But Fred, thanks again, and also thanks to you and your team for supporting us through the conference. I know some of your guys have been up in the early hours, as have we. So thanks again.
It's our pleasure. The Moodle community is really important to us, and it's actually our pleasure to be able to enable this, because it does speak very closely to our vision.
Hi, Fred and all. Can you hear me okay?
Hey, Frank. How you doing?
Hi there. It's not a question. I just wanted to jump in and let folks know if I work with an organization in Canada and in the province of British Columbia called BC Campus, and we are now in the process of doing a extensive sandbox project with the folks at BigBlueButton. So if anybody wanted to connect with me to discuss how that is going, I'm more than happy to do that as well, and answer your questions about how we're doing that here. So I just wanted to jump in and offer that to the folks.
Cool. And Tim, I saw your comment. That would be very good. Perhaps Open University is very happy with its existing product, which is great. But if they're ever unhappy with it or looking for an alternative, I would love to give them one. My theory about this, is just keep making the product better. And I think I should also say too, there are lots of other commercial applications for what we're doing, and they're good, right? Nothing negative to say about them. It's actually a very hard problem to do. I mean, even Skype drops calls. So to be able to maintain persistent connections for a large number of users and multiple sessions on a server across long periods of time, it's not an easy problem to solve. But back with my open source hat on, we don't have to displace the large vendors to succeed. I think just like Moodle, everybody doesn't have to use Moodle for Moodle to win. That's the wrong criteria. I've looked at many other open source, many other segments with open source projects, and the one I kind of like is like MySQL. MySQL never had to displace the large incumbent databases. It just had to offer an increasing compelling alternative that an increasingly large number of people felt was worthwhile, and they contribute towards it, and a really nice ecosystem built up. Because I'm old enough to know when there was no MySQL, and your options for a database were very limited. And I think that MySQL caused a lot of the other options to improve their product, and it was a good. So if BigBlueButton can ever become the MySQL equivalent of web conferencing, I think we will have contributed a lot. Yes. So the question in the forum is blindside networks, and so I wear two hats. I'm actually the CEO of Blindside Networks, and I'm also the product manager and developer of BigBlueButton. And Blindside Networks is the company that Richard and I started when we spun the BigBlueButton project out of Carleton University. And I think it's worth pointing out that it's really important for any open source ecosystem that there are commercial companies that are entrepreneurial and build businesses around it, and that they can generate revenue, and that revenue enables them to contribute back to the project. So there are a number of companies that provide commercial support for BigBlueButton. Blindside Networks is one of them. And we don't want to be the only one. That wouldn't be a very good ecosystem of commercial companies. We just want to be the best and hopefully grow a worldwide ecosystem of users, developers, educational institutions, and companies all providing commercial support, all using BigBlueButton and all contributing to it.
Fred, I noticed that Christina had a question about the locking feature for the chat. When that's implemented, would the moderator still be able to chat privately with one of the regular users to troubleshoot, etc.?
Yeah, I think so. I think the answer is yes. So the moderator, so this is the nuances, right? The moderator should be able to initiate the private chat, but users would not be able to initiate private chat. They'd only be able to do private chat with the moderator. So there's a little more work we have to do on that. But yeah, that's what you would expect, and that's what it will do. So Tim, your question is about how many committers there are in BigBlueButton. So if I flash up the list of committers, let's see, there are 6 core committers with BigBlueButton, and maybe similar to Moodle, you can't get code into the BigBlueButton code base unless it goes through one of these people. There's 2 ways to develop an open source project. Many people just contribute on it at the same time, or you have a small group of people with very tight control to make sure that the quality of the product always goes up and not down. So we kind of believe a little bit like the Linus model or the Moodle model, right? Nothing gets into Moodle unless it goes through Moodle headquarters. And for the complexity of something like this, we're very fortunate that Richard's been working on it now for 7 years and rewriting a lot of it as it goes along, refactoring, constantly improving it. So all the capabilities that you see, a lot of it has been done by these core people. And then we have others that contribute to it, and we review their code and put it in. But BigBlueButton is a very small, dedicated group of people, and it's these people here that are doing most of the work. Yes, so Gareth, we plan to ditch Flash in favor of another technology. So what we've been doing with support for the mobile client and the HTML5 client. I don't know if I mentioned it, but we have been working for almost 2 years on an HTML5 client. And it sounds like, wow, that's very long time. Isn't it easy to just do a UI? Turns out the UI isn't really the tough part. It's the BigBlueButton back end. So this is a really good question because I can go down to a little bit more layer in detail. In the back end with BigBlueButton, years ago, it was very much a Flash-centric architecture with shared objects and everything, Pit 5. So what we've been moving it to is that there's a real definition of messages in a JSON format that get passed through an application server written in akka now that handles all the messages. And using Redis with the pub sub, it will now allow a third-party application to listen to that message stream and inject messages into it. So the idea is that everything you see in Flash still works, but now you can have an additional entry point in through like an HTML5 client that everything in the back end just treats it like another external client. So we've had to do a tremendous amount of refactoring in the back end. And you will see some very visible work in the HTML client as the summer and fall goes on. And at some point, you will be able to connect into a BigBlueButton session with an HTML5 client, and that user will appear on the users list, and the presenter won't care. They'll know that the person can hear them, see the whiteboard, and probably do two-way chat. And then depending on the browser you're using, we can probably do two-way audio with WebRTC. And then next would be the two-way video, but the video streams are a little bit more tricky. Turns out FreeSwitch does a really good job of supporting WebRTC audio, and that's what because we built on top of FreeSwitch, we get the WebRTC audio in the next release. And Frank, we've got 5 students, I think, at Seneca College this summer working on BigBlueButton. So, and a lot of them are working on the mobile client. So there's a real focus of activity on this. So there's almost 3 projects that are going on in parallel. There's BigBlueButton Core, which is what you see here, and then there's the HTML5, which triggers a lot of refactoring in the back end, which is all invisible to users. And then there's a mobile client, which also triggers a little bit of refactoring, but the mobile client is literally just another BigBlueButton client. So lots of work going on, and you're going to see more of it surface later this summer and fall.
Fred, just going back to the recording with the option of the button or not, or versus automatic recording. You know, I've worked with staff who always forget to hit that button or always forget to choose where I want this to be saved or whatever. So I think in further up in the chat there was a suggestion where it could be 2 different settings. One could be start the recording automatically for which I would force for some of our users, and the other would be you know, presenter chooses when to stop and start. So what are your thoughts on sort of providing both options, either the forced or the presenter?
We will probably do both. Like it'll be there's an ability in BigBlueButton from the API to put in a lot of properties for a meeting, whether it's recorded or not. So we might actually add one more property, which would be hide record button. And if that's the case, it simplifies the UI, but it also makes it work exactly like it does now. So I think what you'll find is we'll offer both. In the open source version, there's lots of API examples that ship with it, so you can try it right away. And it'll probably show the record button on by default, but in the documentation, we'll show how you can turn it off. So third-party integrators can decide on a meeting-by-meeting basis, does this want it to be all recorded? And in fact, I can guarantee you we're going to do it because we work with a couple companies who use BigBlueButton for online tutoring, and they always want the session to be recorded for obvious reasons.
That sounds great. Thanks for that, Fred. Just picking up on another couple of questions that I noticed in the forums, and I just thought I'd raise them here so that they were sort of with this session. Somebody had an awesome setup of iMoot on their TV or their big screen, but the chat text options were quite small, so, you know, just a small set of font sizes. So, you know, like if someone wanted to suggest you increase those options, where would they go to do that? And also there was another question about the use of emoticons. So apparently we can raise our hand, but we can't put a smiley face or a thumbs up or, you know, some of those other things that other systems have.
Yes, so I'm laughing, but I'll talk about the first one. I'm kind of chuckling. The options, really, it wasn't meant to do much more except increase the size of chat, the size of the font. It reflected that we just didn't want a lot of options there. If we didn't need it, we didn't put it in. And that kind of led to, where did the raise hand go away? In the users list, to provide only one column, I made a decision where it doesn't make sense for moderators to raise their hand. This is the one-to-many use case. It only makes sense for students. So for moderators, show the gear icon, which gives you some choices in terms of muting the other users. But users would see a hand icon, which they could raise their hand. But I've gotten lots of feedback that in some like group collaboration where everybody's a moderator, nobody can raise their hand because only viewers can. So I think what we'll do is you'll see a button appear. I can't promise it for this release, but that's one of those features that if I see everything else coming together, I can get one of the developers working on it. It's not hard to do. Put another button with some emote icons, and it's it's relative to the other things that we're doing, like the WebRTC support, which took us months. In fact, I think we've been working on it for over a year now. This might not be hard to do, but there's some other things we got to finish first, and maybe during one of the beta iterations, we'll get some emote icons in. And the idea would be is that everybody could raise a hand, and everybody could have a smiley face, or talk louder, or clap, or yes or no, and we would give the moderator still the ability to clear out all the statuses. Yes, exactly, Christina. You're going to see the gear icon change a little bit. We're going to change how there's going to be some slight change in just how the functionality will work. It'll be easier for me to show it to you than it would be. It'll be easier for you to see the beta. Hopefully, when you see things like the lock settings won't actually be exactly like they're shown. We've iterated enough that I think we can get it down to just two choices, which will be apply lock profile to viewers, and then there would be one that says edit profile, or probably no, just apply lock profile to, apply lock profile to viewers and clear lock, or enable all features, and then the lock profile would take you to here, and then saving it is not like a save; it would be like an apply. This is me constantly trying to reduce the number of buttons and the number of options to the user and just make it simpler. And I recognize that I've observed that the simpler we make BigBlueButton, the wider the adoption. So with each release, my mantra is if we can make the product more functional but simpler, but yet simpler or elegant, then we're headed in the right direction. Yes, so LibreOffice is used internally. In fact, on Ubuntu 14.04, we get like LibreOffice 4.3.1, I think it is. It's a really recent version. So it's going to do a good job, but the fonts will still be a bit of a bugaboo. If you put fonts into your PowerPoint document and you upload it to the server, and the server is going to use LibreOffice to convert it, there'll be some font substitution. It's still the best to save it as PDF, because then all the fonts come through. And I'm just amazed. Like it does a really good job. There's an open source project called PDF to SWF, where I'm zooming in on here, and that's a font. That's not a bitmap image. So any line art comes through really well in BigBlueButton. If I put up a map here or like anything from Illustrator, anything that's drawn comes through really nice. Have a look at Jigsaw Learning. So you're going to laugh, but I actually don't spend a lot of time looking at the other products. There are about, when we first started off with BigBlueButton, I found a list on the internet of there was over 50 commercial web conferencing systems out there. I think some of them were just white labels of the same one, and there are very few open source ones. And in terms of where I listen to, I listen to what the users are asking. And it's also a little easier for BigBlueButton in the respect that we're not creating anything remarkably new. We're doing things that a lot of systems have done in the past, but we're just trying to do it in an easier way that's better integrated, and it's really solid. So I'll check it out, Carrie. I have not looked at it. So Christine asks, just a small question. How come some of the names are shortened, 3 dots, and other times the same names are not shortened? It's called a bug. We discovered this after release, and I was like, you know what? This one we can live with, and we'll just fix it the next release. So, yeah, you know, it's just I'm very happy. Like we will this. I think it actually is. I think it is even fixed in the builds. Yeah, there should be no more dots. Those dots were a carryover from some previous code where we put the person's name and the first line they wrote on the same line.
Hi, Fred, Gareth. Personally, can I thank you very much. I mean, I found your presentation really, fascinating on so many levels, and thank you very much for your very in-depth answers and JSON thingy and how it all integrates. And from a person who's really heavily into computing, to find of having a GUI where you just swap, have JSON go as a protocol, and then you can then, I'll swap another GUI out, and then if the GUI doesn't matter, I'll go to the next one. Absolutely brilliant. So thank you very much indeed for your time. I absolutely loved it. I sort of transfixed all the way through.
My pleasure. My pleasure. And you will see a beta come out, and everyone in the community will when the beta is available, I'll be making announcements to the Moodle groups as well, so you can hear about it, you can see it, you can try it out. The API is backward compatible, so if you're using BigBlueButton 0.81, you'll be able to try out the later version. I look forward to more feedback from others. And again, thanks for the opportunity to share. I'll hang around for a few more minutes if anyone else wants to ask any more questions, but I think we can call it done. And you can always ask the questions online. Now that I've answered almost all of them, I think I'll go back and fill in some of the answers for some of the other questions that are posted in the iMoot forums. But thanks again for everybody.
Indeed. Yes, thanks, and thanks again, Fred. I think all those questions have been answered. So, yeah, no good.
All right. Have a great day, everybody.